What happens to his neshama? As we all know, there's a difference between the first 3 days and 7 days of Avelut. We're going to speak about that. What happens to the neshama the first 3 days, how he goes to visit his grave, and then what happens during the 7 days when he's still by the house, and then the 30 days, etc. There's an idea afterwards of chibut kever, which is certain pains that he has to go through that is attributed to the dead person, even while he is in the kever. Even while he is in the kever, there's chibut kever. There's something that's called gilgulei neshamot, the gilgulim that happens to a neshama afterwards. Bli neder, we're going to speak about that also. We will also speak about something that's called Dibukim, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Dibukim, where do these Dibukim come from? What do they have to do with? How is it taken? We'll speak about seancing that some people like to do. Hopefully it's not mutar, but some people like to call and speak to the dead. How does that work? We'll give you the how-to of how to speak to the dead. 101? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to say how. I'm not going to say it. No, we're not allowed to. Just joking. What?
Not 411?
Not 411. That's good. Yeah, it was American. Okay, anyway, so that's it. The seancing is also one of the things that have to do... If they're going to please open the window. Okay, seancing, we'll also speak about that, how to speak to the dead. And I said, Gilgulei Neshamot, Chibut Kever. Okay, then, you should know there's a whole Masechet called Masechet Gan Eden, and there's a Masechet Gehinom. I'm not going to go through the whole Masechta with you, okay, because it's going to get a little bit boring, but I will speak about Gan Eden and Gehinom, about, you got to know what you're in store for, at least Gan Eden, at least we're all in store for Gan Eden, right? Gehinom is, for your neighbor. But I'll go upon him just in case you have to know what's going to happen to, you have to know all these different types of things. And the question is, why do we have to speak about that? Like I said, today is a Divrei Hagdama, introduction. I want to know why we need to speak about these things. Why are we spending time? It will probably take us a good number of shiurim. Okay? I venture to say a good number of shiurim. It could be between 15 to 20 shiurim even. There's plenty to say. I also want to speak about Shari Gmul, meaning the din v'mishpat, what the mishpat is going to be after it happens. Is olam haba tchiyat meitim? Is it not? There's a lot to say. Okay, so the question is why, before we discuss any of these details, why do we need to discuss it? As they say, my da'ava, whatever will be, let it happen, whatever's going to happen, we'll find out. It might be in for some surprises, we might be in for not. I'll speak about Bli Neder, also near-death experiences. I will give a lot of stories of near-death experiences in order that we could feel and see how real what we're speaking about is. And we're also going to speak halachically in a few things in Avelut. Maybe we'll speak about the power of Kaddish if we have time. We'll speak about Avelut, where the days come from, etc. We'll see how much we have time for, Bekitzer. Okay? There's a lot to say. So why did you say ignorance is bliss? I'd rather not know than to know. And that is exactly what the idea of today's shir is. Okay? We're going to say what the idea is. Now, before we start speaking out chazals to prove how necessary it is, before I start speaking out the rabbis to speak how necessary it is, I want to speak out a reason why. And the answer is very simple. Because many people, most of us, all of us, we go through merutza chayim. We run through life. We go through what we call our hergalim, what we're used to. We spoke about the Shabbat Shuvah Drasha, the things that we're used to and everything. We run through life without so much change. Here and there we try to make a change, try to make a little bit of improvement here and there. But we need sometimes an impetus, an incentive to do it. When a person thinks about death, that is one of the biggest incentives that a person realizes, wait, I got to do something with myself. I cannot continue in this crummy thing that I keep doing. I can't continue. I've got to do it. When a person thinks about death, there's no more powerful dose. When a person remembers the day of death, that is the biggest incentive that a person has to be able to affect himself in one way or the other. Okay? The best way to do it is dafka when he does that, okay? By learning about it, introspecting it, and not just remembering it, but the more you learn it and realize how real it is, the more it is incentive for change, incentive to do something with my life, not to stop waste it. Aleph. Bet, and this is very important, whenever you have a gedder, whenever you have a stop to something, so then you appreciate the thing that you have, okay? If I have something infinitely, if I have something forever, so I don't appreciate the thing that I have. I said in chinuch, we say if a child his whole life heard the word yes, okay, then he really never heard the word yes. Until he hears a no, then he can appreciate a yes. Most children who hate their parents or are very difficult with their parents are those people, or those children that grew up, you can call it spoiled, but it's not more than spoiled, that their parents always let things go. They always let things go. There was no real gvulot, no limitations, etc. Because when there's no limitations, so he never appreciates all the things that he did receive. The money that he constantly got, or the things that he was able to go to, and no limitations. When there's no limitations, there's no bigger destruction for a child. It's reshut. It's a rasha who treats his child like that. You think you're being nice, but you're really being vicious. If everything that he receives is yes, because he never appreciates. And we find those types of kids who received everything, those are the ones that dafka end up not liking their parents, or they always have a hate for their parents, or they can go to some, they could always have difficult issues with their parents because of that. It's the same thing here. When you know that there's death, it puts a gvul to life. It puts an appreciation for the life that you have. When life is forever, so then there's no appreciation for the fact of what you're living right now, because you never really want to think about death. A typical Goyish concept is to ignore death. It's not to speak about it, to try to go around. I a little bit grew up with the idea. Whenever he said about, we might die one day, no, we don't talk about these things. That we don't talk about, change the subject. Okay? And that's a typical Goyish concept. We are not believers of such a concept, because the more you do that, the more you don't appreciate the life that you have. You just keep overlooking what is coming, what's coming soon to a theater near you. You understand? You have to appreciate what's coming in order to appreciate the life that you presently have right now. And then you obviously make the change. You always realize you have to do something about it. But limitations give appreciation to that thing that's limited. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah, it gives a tremendous amount of appreciation. There was whatchamacallit, there's a book which some of us might know. It's a CBT book, okay, by Dr. Burns, David Burns. I think some of us know what I'm talking about, or not. A famous book, right? Is there something wrong? What? Huh? No. He's not. I don't think he's Jewish. No, not him. Did I say David? I meant David. Yeah, I'm sorry. I said David. I meant David.
His Rebbe's Jewish.
His Rebbe's Jewish?
Yeah, really? the guy who made the guy.
I thought he was the one who invented it.
I'm the guy who made
So he was Jewish. Yeah, it makes sense. Look, Lamaisa, I'm not going to get into CBT now, it's our discussion, but it is a very Jewish concept. From all the different therapies, it's the most makes sense. It's talking about, it's basically reframing things, rethinking things. Everything is subjective as opposed to objective. Everything goes according to the way you think. And he talks about different, he has charts and this. It's very mathematical. He took psychology almost into a little bit of a mathematical type of way of reframing everything. I'm okay with it. I'm not discussing it. That's not what I'm here for. The only thing that bothers me is one section in that book, which I double-checked. I looked it up before these shiurim on purpose, because he has one about CBTing, also anxiety on death. When people are scared of death, have fears of death, and all these types of things. Mm-hmm. And, okay, like I said, most of the book is pretty kosher. He's a pretty good guy. He doesn't do anything. Of course, like every goy, he has his little inserts, which, But B'ikaron, he's beseder. But when it comes to this, it's completely treif chazer. Okay, and that's why a person has to know what you're reading and what you're not reading. The whole thing is try to CBT a person, try to make him think cognitively about death, how it's really no big deal, and you don't have to think about it. And he thinks almost philosophically, what is death? If it's nothing, so why should you be afraid of nothing? Nothing is nothing. There's nothing to be afraid of. Nothing doesn't exist. And if it's something, so that something is something that you had. So he talks about what's a person afraid about? What are you worried about? You're not going to be able to play tennis anymore? Are you playing tennis right now as you're reading this book? You're also not playing tennis. So when you die, you're also not going to play tennis. What's the big deal? He talks very logically to try to make you feel like big deal. Oh, my kids and my wife and this, they're not going to have me. So he basically says, don't worry, I'm used to Drew Levad. They manage. Have you ever gone on vacation before without them? Have you ever gone on a work away for a week or whatever? They manage a week without you. Okay, so they'll manage with you dead also on the floor. Not big deal. What's a big deal? So Imamish goes through a whole thing like this. Now, whether the cognitive way of thinking is stupidity or not, okay, but the whole mahalach is a goyish mahalach. It's the idea of trying to ignore here.
He's dealing with people who are not functioning.
Well, okay, yeah. Now that's what I was going to say. If he's talking about people who are mamish in a situation, ala panim, right? It depends. Now, if he's, to me, it looks like he's talking about overall that there's an issue and you shouldn't think about it, and that. But you're right. If a person becomes OCD about it, or if it's making him not function and it's completely destroying you, let it go. You can read it. I'll let it go. Okay, and that is partly part of my introduction here, saying that I hope this doesn't cause anyone anxiety, but we're going to get grubby here. Okay, we're going to speak about what happens by death if it leads to anxiety. So I'll show you the chapter in the CBT book. You can read that also. Okay, we'll try to make a balance so you won't get crazy. Okay, but b'ikaron, a Jewish concept is to think about it, to realize it, to utilize it, because it's the only way you're going to change. A goy whose whole focus of life is, don't think about it, don't think about life, just, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow, right? That type of concept is like, forget about it, just, lo lachshov al zeh kol kach, don't think about it. And that's the nakuda I just wanted to show you. It's a very big difference that we have between them, this idea that we are here to try to make a change, we're here to improve ourselves, and we need this as in something like, I'm going to bring you now about 15 chazals to prove this point, to show this idea that in order to make that change, you need to be able to do that. Okay? Seder? Okay. Now, on a similar note, before I start with all the different chazal, on a similar note, you should know there was two big philosophers, I wrote them down by name, Sartre and Camus. I don't know if anyone's any big philosopher, maybe. You know these names?
I've heard of Camus.
Camus. He's Camusi Madi.
Sartre too. Yeah.
Sartre. When were they alive? How long ago?
Both French, I think.
French. I'm not going to make sense.
Sartre was...
Just approximately.
No, it was in the 20th century.
Oh, recent. Oh, okay, fine.
Maybe Camus.
They both philosophize and have philosophy how the more one is mitbonen into death, okay, the more you think about death, the more you realize how meaningless life is. Meaningless life is. And how that's why it's almost a reason not to think about it, and the more they overemphasize the idea of death, it becomes something a little bit meaningless. Why live? Anyways, tomorrow you're going to die. What's it doing? And, they're already, at least they're a step ahead of the Americans a little bit, because the Americans are like, take advantage, do all your tavot and do this because you're going to die. So they're already like, yeah, but anyways, what are the tavot going to get you? For 5 seconds you get your excitement and this, and then afterwards, anyways, you're going to be a skeleton in the grave after, a few years and finished. You're going to be just, what's the big deal? You're being ashes and this, all over the ocean. Well, who are you? You're nothing anyways. You're not. So that was the more deeper way of thinking it than the typical teenager way of taking advantage of everything they could get their hands on. You understand? That's now that is true from a goyish perspective. If my focus on life or my belief in life is more or less a physical life, then the more you think about death, the more temporary to life is, and the more depressing it is, and the more meaningless it is. Why do it? Once you know, and this is my here, and this is our whole emphasis of why these shirim are taking place, is the more we believe in a spiritual world, and we're going to prove, this is the best proofs, if you want of a spiritual world. The more that you realize there is a spiritual world, a world that is ruchani, there's a life after death, and there's what to afterwards. So once you have that system, so over there, on the contrary, death is a big chizuk for life. It gives you incentive. I have 80 years, 90 years, B'ezrat Hashem, I'm going to use every minute of it. I'm going to take advantage. It gives life to life, and it gives reason to live. You understand what I'm saying? So us, when we, in our mizgeret, in our type of way of thinking, that we believe in an afterlife and we know what we're here for, when we learn about death, it is very productive and it is very meaningful, not meaningless. If your focus is all on body, so of course the more you think about death, the more meaningless life is. But on the contrary, when you realize that there's a reason why we're here, so it becomes much more meaningful. So it's a very good way of understanding this concept, this chiluk, this difference, and how important it is to know these ideas. Okay, it's not stam just to get excited to learn about some mystical ideas. We're here to be able to get our hands on understanding the meaning of life and why we're here. Okay, very good. That was a little bit of a few things. Now, based on that, until the end of the shir, I'm going to give just a few chazals, a few different chazals or different ideas based from the Rabbanim about the importance of learning this subject. Okay? And then next week, B'ezrat Hashem, we will start the actual subject about what happens. Okay? The system, one by one, of what happens. Okay? So let's start with a few things. First of all, in the Midrash and Breshit Rabbah, which is right in our parsha, believe it or not, it says, V'hinei tov me'od zu gan eden. Hinei tov me'od zu gan eden. And he says it says Hinei tov me'od twice. One is for Gan Eden and one is for Gehinom. Gehinom also is tov me'od. And the Midrash says, what's so good about Gehinom? Doesn't sound so pretty. It's not nice over there. Why is it so exciting? So the Midrash says, Shal yidei pachad midin Gehinom, because of your year of Gehinom, you resist from being choteh. Ulechen Gehinom nikra tov me'od. Therefore it's called tov, because by knowing and learning about Gehinom and thinking about it, so it gets you to avoid you from being over any chataim. Okay? And that the Gemara in Ketuvot in Ein Bet brings, Ve'achai yitena libo. There's a pasuk which I'll mention a few times, it's a pasuk in Kohelet, Ve'achai, one who is alive, yitena libo, dvarim shel mita. A person who is alive has to think sometimes about ideas of death, because if he brings death into his lexicon, into his vocabulary, ki sof kol adam lamut, gi'inyanei amita, when a person thinks about it and gets it, so then it will be me'orim to do tshuva. There's a in Kohelet Rabbah. Kohelet Rabbah is another midrash in Kohelet. That's where the pasuk is. Achai yiten alibo elu at tzadikim. Tzadikim notnim mita keneged libam. They always think of the mita. There was a sefer called Shevet HaMusar, which is not learned so much. You could find it in scarce places. You still find it. They have one in Masas Mordechai. They have everything in Masas Mordechai. They don't have it as much. It's not as popular anymore. The answer why it's not so popular anymore, it was learned a lot in Europe. In yeshivas, they used to use the Sefer Shevet HaMusar. It's a little bit of a kadman, about 150 years ago, I think, something to that extent. It has good musar there. Why don't we learn it over there? Because he's too scary. He's not nice. That's why people don't learn anymore. He's very tough sometimes, and he gives good, hard musar. And nowadays, people like to hear, I don't want to give any titles, but don't be miyayesh, everything's going to be okay. Just everything will be fine and just feel good and all these types of things. That's what people want to hear. So nowadays people don't want to hear musar, some hard musar. They want to hear, just everything's hunky dory and everything's fine. Okay, that's a thing. I had a relative that was hearing some of my shirim on Masil Tasharim, and they said they like the shirim, but they don't want to hear it because they more like the shirim that always says everything's okay, you're a good guy, you're nice, it's okay, you're sweet, everything's fine. Whatever you're doing is good. Just try again. That type of thing. What? Don't be so hard on yourself. It's our door. We're so weak that people don't even want to hear. They don't want to hear something so hard. So Shevet HaMusar, he gives it over the head sometimes, and he has a few pieces about death which will be quoted sometimes, and today especially. So he says in Perek Chaf Aleph like this. He brings the Gemara in Brachot that says, in order to be menatzeach liyetzer hara, you have to bring the Yetzer Tov. The only way to conquer the Yetzer Hara is to get the Yetzer Tov. If not, learn Torah. If not, learn say Kriyat Shema. And if not, Yizkor Yom HaMitah. Then a person has to remember the day of death. And he's medayek over there. It doesn't say remember mita, remember death. It says remember the day of death. What's the difference between saying remember death as opposed to the day of death? He says because it's not enough just to remember that I will die, that a person will die. Okay. It's not enough just to remember that one will die. It's important to know what will happen when he will die. That's what he says. And to know and look, be'iyun, into everything that's going to happen, ki sof kol adam lamut, and what is eventually going to happen when that happens. And that's the only way, he says, to be machniya the Yetzer properly. The only real way to be machniya the Yetzer hara is if a person introspects appropriately and properly into what will happen during the day of death. Okay? And what will happen. The Sefer Yashar's Rabbeinu Tam, he says like this: Mi shoved Hashem be'emet, someone who really wants to be Oved Hashem, he should write to himself a sefer. He should write for himself a book, which means a few pages, that it writes there all the punishments that the Rishayim will receive, all the punishments you're going to receive for doing something wrong. In a few words, he says in a few words, write it, and you should make a shvuah and make an oath that I'm going to read this. He says at least once a week. I don't recommend doing that at all. Maybe once a year would be lucky on Yom Kippur. Okay? But he says at least you should try to read into it a little bit. V'yasim libo ala inyanim. You've got to look into these things in order to make sure that you will do it. Okay? That's what he says. Another Marmokim, we quoted this in Shari Tshuva. We mentioned this when we learned Shari Tshuva. He brings different ways of being Choser B'Tshuva. But one of the ways he says to be Choser B'Tshuva is remembering that we're getting old. We're all getting white hairs. A white hairs, like we mentioned during the shir, is a hazmana to Beit Din Shalmala. It means the Beit Din upstairs is inviting us to come upstairs. Every time we get another white hair, it means we're one step closer. So says the Shari Tshuva on that, he says the only way to be properly Choser B'Tshuva is you have to get ready for Hashem, because you don't know when you're going to die. And Kilyotav Yishtonen, he actually says you should be nervous. Yashiv rucho el Elokim asher natana. You're going to go back one day to where you came from, and therefore you should look into your ways and the things that you did. Instead of being calm and regua and complacent, You should be worried. He says you should really be nervous. Okay, now again, we don't want you to be OCD, and I don't want you to lose function, and everyone's going to, go home and not wake up and then, I'm not talking about it, obviously, but a person has to put these ideas, and you'll see when we go through the stories, when we go through what happens, it makes it much more real to learn these ideas. Because you're going to go up to a din v'cheshbon, ech yitvadeh be'et moto b'lev nishbar, and you're going to have to do vidui be'et nishbar. Okay, the same Rabbi Genish writes in Pirkei Avot the opposite also. Remember the schar that tzaddikim are going to get in the future, and remember how much Gan Eden, how beautiful it is, and how good things are up there. So therefore he says it'll be mosif bo ava v'rov chasadim. So therefore a person should go out of his way to do it. The Rosh, another Rishon, in the Orchot Chaim LaRosh, speaks out, you should always try to read the Gemara in Brachot, and Chav Chet, which talks about the Maisa with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in order to remember the Shat Amitato, and it'll be Tzeda L'derech. I brought just a copy of the Gemara in order that I can just read it to you, just so you know the basics of the Gemara. It's on Chav Chet and the famous Gemara. I'm sure most of us are familiar with it, but at least I should mention, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was sick, his Talmidim went to visit him. They said, now Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I don't know if you know, the Gemara says about him, he was one of the main Talmidim of Hillel Zaken, and he knew everything. He knew Siyach HaShedim and the Tzipori, he knew everything. He tchila from Kolator Kula Mamish, but he also knew all the other things. Siyach de Kalim, it says, the discussions that the trees have with each other. He started crying. Look, his day of death has come. He started crying. Sounds right. So his Talmidim said, Ner Yisrael Amuda Yamani, Patisha Chazak. Mipnei Mata Bocha, what are you crying about? Everyone knows where you're going. You got a one-way ticket to Gan Eden. Everybody knows you're good to go. Amar Lehem, if I'm going in front of Basar V'Adam, that today he's here and tomorrow not, and then Shim Koes Alayin Kaso Kasolam, V'Imosrani, if he gets mad at me, or if he gets mad at me, it's not forever. One day he's going to die also. And if he kills me, he can't kill me forever. He doesn't have the capabilities to kill me. So I can be mefayes him, I can give him money, I can bribe him, I can figure things out. And still I'd probably be crying. Still I'd probably and now but now I'm going to Kadosh Baruch Hu, he's going to be here forever. And if he is angry at me, it's forever. His kas is always there. If he traps me, he can do it forever. If I die, it's a proper mitah. It's not a physical mitah. It's a ruchniyat. It's a spiritual mitah. And I can't bribe him. I can't slip him a couple bucks and make sure that he's okay. And here I have in front of me, I'm about to die, and I have two in front of me. Echad Gan Eden, Echad Gehinom, he says. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to Gehinom. You don't think I should be crying? Who knows? I might be going. Again, you see what the Gemara writes about this person. Kol Tar Kula, he was the Gadol Ador. He was the one that saved Klal Yisrael during the time of the Churban Beit HaMikdash. And he says, Achai yiten elibo. This is the idea, this is the yesod that a person has to always remember. It's good to know that Gemara. To always remember that a person has to always to keep these things on him. Okay? The Kad V'Kemach, that's the Rabbeinu Bechaya, he says an interesting thing, which is funny. He says that people are nimshal to a behema. Okay? Kad V'Kemach is under Avelut. He writes, people are compared to a behema. And he reads a different shot why. Usually that's not the reason why he's saying. He says this reason, and he says because behemot, when they know they're all going to shchita and they're still complacent, they're still okay, they seem to be beseder gamar. I was by a beit shchita when we learned shchita about 15-20 years ago, and I went to one of these beit shchitas, and it's very interesting how it works. You have a line of cows behind the gate, and they're very lined up perfectly behind the gate. They open one gate, and one cow comes out, and the next cow stays and waits for his turn, like a good man. Not that don't jump the line, like don't get ahead of the line. Like the what? Like the lamb. Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, he stays, and they all go, and they're all lined up there. And that's the truth. More or less, they're not blindfolded. They're all there, and he opens the gate. One guy comes out. They lie him down. They wrap up his legs, more or less. The shochet comes out. You picture the guy with the thing. And the shochet comes out. His whole job is about a 5-second job. He comes out like that. So blood everywhere, squirting all over the place. Within 3 seconds, the chain's already up, and he's hanging up on the thing, and he's already dead. You should know, just so you know, in case someone here has questions about that. He's properly dead. I would speak about it scientifically, but you should know. It's very interesting. With all kosher animals, they saw that the main, the vertex, the main part of the brain, which is the part that's the most nervous system, it's all in the front. They're both in the front. There's a front part and a back part, and they all envelop over here in the front of the neck, in the same part that gets cut. And it's only with a cow and a sheep and a goat. Those are the only three animals that happen. And a pig and a horse and other animals, things like that, they have one in the front and one in the back, which means if you would shecht a pig, if you would do shechita on a pig, it would be painful. He would actually feel the pain because he wouldn't be completely brain dead yet. Okay, it would take a certain amount of time, whatever, until the blood comes out. It would take a certain amount of time. But with kosher animals, the second that it happens, they're both fully cut. There's no connection to the brain. The pain is completely gone.
But that's a jugular, they call it.
It's a jugular, but it's a little bit more than that. Yeah, there's a piece, there's a part where all the main parts of the blood of the in the brain is. It's called the vertex circular, something like that. I don't remember exactly. Anyways, but what's interesting is, and someone, I was there with someone else, a Talmud Chacham actually, and he was just like, doesn't anyone like realize what's about to happen to them? Like they're all waiting in line very patiently, very nice, all moo, they're all mooing. No one seems to be very excited. No one seems to care. They all take their turn and they're very excited. But the answer is, this is exactly what Rabbeinu Bechai writes. He always is writing the same thing. And he says this, a behema, even though he knows he's omed l'shchita, he doesn't know the difference. He doesn't realize what's happening to him. He doesn't realize what's happening. He's not getting scared from it. It doesn't affect him in any type of mental or physical way. It doesn't bother him so much. He doesn't get affected by him. So he says, unfortunately, 99% of the population is the same thing. Well, 99.9% of the population is the same thing. Unfortunately, people don't realize, that's how it is. People just go to death. No one even thinks about it. Yeah, one day, who knows? And it's a crazy thing that people could live their whole entire life with some type of phenomenon, not realizing that tomorrow, tomorrow could be, that's it. If you would, it would change a whole person's life. He wouldn't be choteh at all. He wouldn't have any room to do that. But a person lives like a behemoth. That's exactly what it means, a behemoth. He forgets Yom HaMitah, he forgets that it's all temporary, and he can just keep going until Mom is that last day. It's a crazy thing. You see it with elderly people, how people are able to do such a, just to know. They don't realize that time is of the limit. The Rav Chaim Vital in Shari Kedusha, Rav Chaim Vital, of course, the Talmud of the Arizal, says these words: "Le'olam al yalizu me'enecha yom hamitah." Don't ever forget the day of death. V'yom hakever v'yom hadin hagadol. Don't ever forget the final day when a person is going to go to the grave. Ki'ilu ata ro'eh oto. Make sure you see it. Uke'ilu ata omed bo, uke'ilu ata nichnas adin. Pay attention. He says, be mitzayeret, frame it in your mind, as if it's there, as if you're standing in front of Beit Din Shomala. V'zeh kedei shelo yavo levavcha yerhurim belochet she'evar me'idim alav ve'yaviu lecha ledin la'atid levo bal korchach. You're going to go there anyways, so you might as well have it, and you'll be able to protect yourself from the future of having a thing. I'm going back to the Shevet HaMusar now. Listen what the Shevet HaMusar says. He says some heavy Musar now. Okay? He says some heavy Musar. First, he says, I'll quote one point. So he says like this. First of all, I just spoke about, Rav Chaim Vital says that a person has to picture himself Yom HaMitah, Yom Hadin HaGadol. He gets much more grubby. Like I said, Shevet HaMusar, people don't like to read that book anymore. It's not fun. He basically says, picture yourself, he says this, the words of Shevet HaMusar, picture yourself dead on the floor in your kitchen. That's what he says. If a guy dropped dead on the floor of your kitchen, he says in the middle of your house, dead, chas v'shalom. I shouldn't say, I'm saying picture, I'm not saying chas v'shalom, it happened. So I think I could say the word you. Okay? But he says, picture yourself now dead on the floor of the kitchen. And all your family is surrounding and looking at you going, wow, it looks like he's dead. Yeah? And that's it. That's what he says. He says these words. He says, Shu met beritzba, kol b'nei beito misvivav, ve'aneshama, we'll speak about this Be'ezrat Hashem coming soon. The neshama is holech ve'chazer. Soon after mitah, the neshama goes back and forth. Incredible. We'll see the actual maisim that happen together with what Chazal say are very in sync, the two of them. The neshama is going back and forth, so you know what's going on. He says before, you know what's going on. This is before any near-death experiences, and the Shevet Musar is already saying, and you know everything that's going around your body. Okay? He writes, and he also says, and this is also brought in Chazal, that you know you're going back and forth to different places that you're used to in your house or in the area that you were, etc. You're back and forth to all these different places. And like I said, he gives strong musar. He says, you were 5 minutes ago, you were a very wealthy man, a person with a lot of money, if it was talking about an ashir or whatever wealthy you have, with a family and this, and here you are, now you're naked beloy klum. Now you're arum beloy klum. You're naked, finished. You don't have any clothes, they're already going to strip your body anyways, they're going to take it away. You have no money, you're bankrupt. There's never been in the history of mankind a person who has been a wealthy person that didn't go bankrupt. Every single person went bankrupt. Why? Because one day he dies, everybody dies. Even the guy in Forbes, number one guy, doesn't make a difference. He's also going to end up dying one day, and it's all over. What is he useful? Who knows about the guy 100 years ago who was a multimillionaire? Who knows about him? The only thing he keeps is, of course, the tzedakah that he gives. Okay? Al-Kopanim, that's the idea. He says, and picture your osher, and he does it on purpose. He gives a good one of these punches under the belt also. He throws one in. And he says, and all your money is going to go to your wife's second husband, right? Your wife's going to get remarried. And she inherited all your money. So it's going to go when she gets remarried. All that hard-earned money, 60, 70 years you were working, so he says to Ba'ala Sheni, she's going to get remarried now. And all that money is going to go. It sounds funny, but it's so true just to think, what are you slaving for? Why are you slaving and slaving for more and more and more? Go give it to Tzedakah or do something with it. I'm not saying to give away all your money. I'm not stupid. Obviously, you got to take care of your family, etc. But going till the last day just for what? So it goes to shtuyot. It ends up going to the wrong places. And there they are. He says, and then they're all around you. And then eventually they take you to the kever. They take the person to the kever and they start lowering him into the kever. And everyone's crying. You're a good guy. Let's say he's a good guy. They're crying. He was, and they start. And then suddenly, boom, boom. What happens? They start throwing dirt on you. And it's really not so bad. The Chofetz Chaim used to do these things. And it's not stuff for the Chofetz Chaim. You don't have to be the Gadol Torah to do these things. You just stand there and think about it. Now it's hard for us to do this. I'll be honest with you. When I go to kever, almost every time. Oh, that's what you get from me. Oh, I thought there was something wrong with that. Right? Every time I go, not every time, but almost every time, many times when I go to kever, I picture what the Shevet HaMosar says here. You picture, Lo Aleinu, Chas v'Shalom, Ad Mea v'Esrim, I'll give you more years than that, right? Ad Mea v'Esrim, picture yourself in the place of this guy who's being lowered. He's going down into the kever, they're putting him down, and then boom, one thing, a clump of dirt, and another clump of dirt, another clump, until it's completely covered and you don't see him anymore. And I think about it at the time when it happens also. I go, yeah, sure, everyone's here, so everyone's so sad. In about 15 minutes, he's going to be all by himself. It's all over. He said a Kaddish, that's it. And now he's by himself. And not just that, and he brings it all in Shevet HaMosar, but something I've always thought about even before I saw it, is then what happens after that? At nighttime, bitter cold in the middle of a graveyard. It's scary in a graveyard, no? Right? This guy is just sitting there lying down in the ground, and the neshama's going back and forth. The first 3 days at least, we'll see the 7 days, 3 and 7. The neshama's there, and you're just sitting by yourself in a graveyard. If it's the winter, pouring rain coming down on your grave, and there he is all by himself, turning himself into a bag of bones. He ends up being just a bag of bones. It's important sometimes, remember, I get in scary, I'm not coming to make anyone with some serious OCD problems and start having anxiety your whole life. That's not the idea. But like I mentioned before, it's supposed to give a certain incentive to realize we're not here forever. There's got to do something about it. Every minute that you take advantage of and what you do is very... I think. Then he talks about afterward the din v'mishpat and all that, and he says to make sure about all the careful for every wrong word that you said and all the tiyulim, all the places that you went incorrect and all the things that you did wrong, you have to start thinking about it. Okay, that's what he says. He continues though, and he says these words after that beautiful introduction. Unfortunate is the one who doesn't think of malach hamavet. Woe is to the person who doesn't think of when the neshama goes out. And he keeps saying ois about chibut kever, about the rima and tola'ah, the worms that go inside of a person's body, and the person physically feels those worms. Okay, you should know it's a physical thing. Bli neder, that's also something we're gonna speak about. The rima and tola'ah that comes in the kever is also chibut kever, a kind of chibut kever, and that is also something that is felt. Oy mi she'einu choshev mi yom adin. Unfortunate is the one who doesn't think of yom adin. Mi she'einu choshev b'mishpat Gehinom, who doesn't think of Gehinom. Or mi she'einu choshev b'mitot meshunot, who doesn't think about all the different mitot that you can go b'gilgulei neshamot. Okay, and he also brings. Now again, I told you, I'm saying it again, I said it a couple of times, it was a tough sefer, and we don't use all the mussar that he says, but he says a woman who sings to her child about Shirei Agavot and this, and sweet songs and all that, very nice. But he, in his opinion, Ela Tashir Shirim Shel Meorot Gan Eden, she should sing to him about Gan Eden and Gehinom. That's what he says. A mother should sing to her child. Okay, once upon a time they had a strong skin, they had thick skin, and they weren't like us. Rather, you should sing shirim of Gan Eden, Gehinom, Din v'cheshbon. That a person should know, things are not simple. And then he says, Ukishamatchila deber, when a child starts speaking, she should speak to him about these inyanim, and only when you're osek b'Torah, you're going to be saved from this. Only someone who's busies himself with Torah, so he is going to be able to be saved from these types of difficulties. And that's what it is. Listen what the Yarud Dvash was. Yarud Dvash is Rav Yaakov Emden. Not Rav Yaakov Emden, Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz, who lived before the Vilna Gaon, in the time period of the Vilna Gaon. Im yadu anashim yonesh Gehinom, if people would learn a little bit about onesh Gehinom and really understand it, hayu munachim al paneim v'tzoakim v'lo hayu oskim klal be'olam hazeh. They wouldn't busy themselves so much with olam hazeh. They'd start getting down to the good stuff. They got to get into the important stuff in life. They wouldn't busy themselves with this shtiyot and that shtiyot. If a person really, really understood what Gan Eden had to deliver to us, so they wouldn't busy themselves with these types of things. The Chafetz Chaim brings an interesting thing. Listen to this. It's a famous ma'aser from the Gaon. I said it one time in a Monday shir, but I'll just mention. The Gaon says that we have no of onesh. We have no understanding of what proper punishment is of Gehinom. Ala ve'ra kala. We have no understanding of how serious it is. Afilu mitzarim k'mo bal reshit chokhmah. We'll be speaking, hopefully quoting from the Reshit Chokhmah, who speaks in detail about the 7 levels of Gehinom. Okay? If you have the 7 levels of Gehinom and understand it a little bit, Rakanagu betipa shalayam. They only understood a little bit of what real Gehinom is like. Even though they speak in detail about it, neged amitata inyan. Nobody really, as much as we're going to speak about what Gehinom is like and what chibut hakever and the pain, he says you should know it's only a drop in the bucket. It's not, he says, in the ocean. A drop in the ocean of what it really is. It's incredibly painful, difficult, and not easy. Now listen to this. There was a true story which I mentioned once I said in the Monday shir, where the Vilna Gaon learned together with his Talmidim the Reshit Chokhmah, all about Gehinom and what's in detail there. And he said this statement also about how serious it is, and you should know everything that we're learning is a drop. It's going to be 20 times worse, Chevra. You don't know what you're in for in Gehinom. Oh boy, you're in big trouble. Right? So when he finished, it says one of the Talmidim there couldn't handle it so much because, once upon a time people used to listen to the Rebbe. And he so hurt him that he actually got sick in bed. He got sick, proper sick. He started getting, I don't know if he had nervous spasm or he was in bed. He was mamish chole, I don't know. He got proper sick and he was in bed. So listen to this. I think it was worth it for him to get sick because he got bikur cholim from guess who? You know who's Mevakir Cholim, who visited the sick person? The Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon went to visit him. I think it's worth getting sick to get people home from the Vilna Gaon. That's worth it. Anyways, the Vilna Gaon went to him and said, I saw you're sick and I heard about what happened and this because of what I spoke about. I want to tell you, so obviously he has to appease him. And then I want to tell you, everything I said is 100% true. Okay? To the different detail, right? A very nice appeasal. Thank you very much for your... right? I want to tell you, I didn't exaggerate a kihuzeh. Everything I said was very true. But then the Vilna Gaon was nice enough to say, to add a certain appeasal. But he said, he says all the remembrances that one has that Hashem has on what you did wrong, if you have yisurim, difficulties in this world, all the difficulties that you go through in this world, ki yatzar shesovlim bezeh olam oleh lecheshbon gadol. Every difficulty that a person has, from little to massive to big, goes and makes a very, very big cheshbon calculation in the checklist over there about Gehinom and what comes to there. V'chelik gadol menachim, and a big amount goes away with the tzaret. Ubezemit katena cheshbon. So he was nice to him. He did him a favor, and he said, "I know I told you how bad Gehinom is, but I'll tell you the truth. You should know. Don't be so uptight, because things do get better according to the sick. You're sick right now. All your sickness, you're helping. He's telling him you're sick right now. It's helping your cheshbon in Shemaim, and hopefully you'll be okay. I'm finishing up right now. Let me just mention one quick thing. The Malbim says the Tachlit HaChaim, the purpose of life, is death. The purpose of life is death. Now again, a goy would say it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense. Tachlit of life is death. It's on Iyov, the Malbim in Iyov, because only then is when you start life. Only after death is when you start real life. That's the Chaya Nefesh, of course, that's the real Tachlit. So as long as you are alive, you are what we say a walking, ticking clock. You're a ticking clock, which is going towards death. But you should prepare as much Seder L'derech through your Amal Torah by learning Tov Shem and Shem and Tov. Tov Shem means it's better to have a good name upstairs. Shem and Tov is some your ta'avot, from eating something good or feasting and all these types of things. Instead of worrying about feasting and taking care of all your bodily ta'avot and needs, worry about your Shem Tov, making sure your name is good. It doesn't mean for other people. It means upstairs that you should have a good name. This is an expression which we'll be speaking about also later, about the idea that the world, life is a bridge. For us, life is a bridge. For them, life is an end. Okay, I'm believing that we're going to speak about also the hashkafik and also the way it works, lamaisa. Through the way it works, lamaisa, we're also going to speak about the hashkafik part. But for them, life is an end. For us, we understand life is a bridge. It begins with birth and it ends with death. Okay, it doesn't end. That's just the beginning of the end. Okay, but life is just a bridge, Balma. When you realize it's a bridge, so a bridge doesn't bother you so much. A bridge is only there. No one lives on a bridge. You go on a bridge as a means to get somewhere else. That's what you have to remember. That the idea of the bridge is, and we all know the famous song, Kol Ha'olam Kula, Gesher Tzar Me'od. You know the song, huh? Come on, guys. Yeah? Kol Ha'olam Kula Gesher. That's what it means. The whole entire world is a Gesher. It's an appeasement. It's to make us realize that the world is only a bridge. It's temporary habitat. It's not here to live. It's only here as a means to an end, to get us somewhere else. There's a person, Rav Tukachinsky, which I'll be quoting from in the future. You know Rav Tukachinsky, Rav Chil Tukachinsky was nifter about 60 years ago, and he wrote a sefer on Avelut. He was the first person who wrote a sefer on Avelut. And he named the sefer Gesher HaChaim. Gesher HaChaim. Okay, he was a big genius. He was, together with the Chazon Ish. He was from the Kadmonim. He was from the Gdolim. He wasn't a stammer person who wrote a book. He called it Gesher HaChaim because it's the bridge of life. It's a bridge of life. Life is a Gesher. That's all it is. It's Gesher. Life is a bridge. And you also have to remember, it's a temporary place. It's not a permanent place. And it ends, as they say, when it ends. It just ends when it ends, but that's it. But don't think that that's the final stop, because there are many stops. There are many stops on the way. Be'ezrat Hashem, when there is afterwards a future. I will end. There was a few other Mar Makomot, but I'll end this one at least until we start next time with Rabbi Gehinom Wasserman. Rabbi Gehinom Wasserman, you would always say over. They bring this down in Orach Chanan. He would always say over to his Talmidim the Maisa with the Dibuk. It's Yedua that there was one of the, you know what a Dibuk is, right? A Dibuk is a possessed body, a body that was possessed by a neshama. Like I said, we'll speak about it later. Is that Hashem?
The Satan.
No, it's not the Satan. No, I can't say it's a Satan. It's something else. So 1932, right before the Chafetz Chaim was niftar, there was a Dibuk. There was one they say not so long ago either, but said the Chafetz Chaim removed a Dibuk. These are little spirits that are walking around this world. And they're still here. Anyways, so one time the Chafetz Chaim removed the Dibuk, and the Chafetz Chaim and the Rabbi Gehinom Wasserman, his Talmud, was there. Ayin be'ayin ra'iti. He said he saw it, and he would always give it over to his Talmidim, saying that this is a very strong chizuk for us to know about these things, to learn about the neshama and what it is. And even more than that, I quote to you the lashon we used to say, "Acharei she'ra'iti be'ayin ma'aseh dibuk, ayin be'ayin be'ma'aseh dibuk." After I saw the ma'aseh dibuk, he says, "Ein shum siba." There's no reason that I'm going to receive any schar in olam haba, and en shiba shel schar be'olam haba ala emuna shali. For my emunah, I'm not going to get any more schar in olam haba. Fooey, I lost it. He says, I lost all my schar in olam haba because it's so obvious to me. It's kind of the same schar that you don't get for knowing that this table is here. We all know a table's here. I don't have to prove to you a table's here. He said, by him, olam haba is so clear as day. It's so pashut, and it was given to him on a plate. It was spoon fed to him. Olam haba. So he says, I'm not going to get any more schar anymore. Oh well, chaval. I lost all my schar in olam haba. For emunah, he meant. For my level of emunah, I'm not going to get any more. Hopefully, you'll get it for other things. They say he was a good guy, right? Rabbi Gehinom Wasserman was one of the Gedolei Rosh Yeshivot. For those who didn't realize, he was nifter in the Holocaust. He was killed in the Holocaust. Hashem Yimkom Damam. He was actually killed in Fort 9. together with this Talmidim. But you just see this idea that the koach of learning about what a dibuk is, and learning it's not just to learn mystics. We're not coming to learn mysticism here, even though obviously it's interesting, but that's not our old tachlit over here. Okay, there's a lot more. It's brought in the Hagdama Tashari Gilgulim also. The Talmid there of Rav Chaim Vital also brings that there was also in 1666 also a dibuk that was removed, and he writes out the whole story of the dibuk there, and he says, Katafti Yedzeh, I wrote it in order to be mechazek et abriyot, in order to be mechazek, is to make us realize there are gilgulim, you should realize there are neshamat, they are tantagram, and they are around in the world, and they're still here, and it's very real stuff. And for us, we have to know. Now, Baruch Hashem, we don't have dibukim so much, but we have, like we said, many, and we'll speak about in the future, a few shurim, the near-death experiences, which is almost the same. Okay, and that's why we on purpose want to speak about it and get into it, to make us realize what it is. These are our words of our introduction. B'ezrat Hashem, next time, we will speak a little bit of the levels of what happens when a person dies, and the different levels of punishment that a person receives. Okay, we're not getting into Gehinom yet and all that stuff that's coming later after you guys have a little bit more skin to be able to handle it. Okay, right now we're just going to speak about the beginning part, about what the first stages after a person, lo aleinu, is niftar.